Okay, good morning, guys. Please confirm if am I audible to you all and if you can see my screen. Okay, thanks for confirming. So let's get started. Just a second, hold on. Okay, so what did we cover in last class? I think we discussed on the Azure CLI and PowerShell part, how you can set up that on your local machine, including the guided file I had given you with all the instructions how you can set it up on the local machine. So I hope you would have gone through that. And today we are moving on to the next module that we have. Module number 1 is now complete. And now we are going on to module number 4, that is Azure VM. In between 2 and 3, we will come back once after completing Azure VM module. 2 and 3 is basically storage. So we'll come back to storage after completing virtual machine module. So that's the plan. One question here, we have to install Windows or Bash. Either one is enough. No, have both installed. Have both installed because going forward, you may need either of them, right? Sometimes you might need to work on CLI bash. Sometimes you would need to work on PowerShell. So it's better to have both. So you can set up both on your machine, and having that on your machine won't do you any harm. So that it's better to have them. Okay, so let's go to module number 4. Let me take you to that PPT for a second. So what are the topics that we have in module number 4? It's more about virtual machine. This module is all about virtual machines in Azure. What is virtual machine? Configurations related to Azure VM, disks in Azure VM, network interface cards, automating deployment, or how you can do your VM deployment via PowerShell, CLI, etc. ARM template. The topic of ARM templates will be discussed later on, not right now. After completing storage account modules, we will look on to ARM templates. VSD templates. We mostly don't use VSD templates as of today, but still, I will tell you what is meant by a VSD template. Custom VM images, Azure Virtual Machine scale set, availability sets, and availability zone. Availability zone is not mentioned over here, but that also will be included within Azure VM. So first of all, I don't have to tell you what is a virtual machine. We all know probably what is meant by a virtual machine. Virtual machine, the concept of virtualization allows you to create or allows you to virtualize a physical hardware. When I say physical hardware, if you have a server hardware with you, which does not contain any operating system as of now, you may virtualize it. And after virtualizing, you can create VMs on top of it. Each VM will act like individual servers. And in that VM, you can have any operating system of your choice installed, and you can configure them and use it for your operations, whatever operations that you have to do. So this concept is what we call as a virtual machine or virtualization in general. Now, the base of entire cloud computing platform or the entire cloud computing platform, we can say, is built on top of this technology called as virtualization. An integral part of the concept of virtualization is that VM, virtual machine. So Azure provides us this service called as virtual machine, on demand virtual machines you can create according to your need, provided you have the subscription. I have told you about subscription yesterday. So if you have an Azure account, access to Azure portal, and there is a valid subscription with you, valid Azure subscription with you, then in that case, you will be able to create Azure virtual machines without any issues. These virtual machines can be used for any purpose, typically for which we can use a server. For any purpose for which we can use a server, you can actually use these virtual machines. That's the idea. Only difference here would be that compared to having virtual machines on your local computer or within your data center, compared to that, the difference would be only that these VMs would be running in Azure's infrastructure. I have told you about the various regions and all which Azure has. So in one of the region that you have selected, maybe South India, Central India, whatever it may be, in one of the region which you have selected, that is where these virtual machines will be created. That's all the difference. So technically, you having a VM on your local machine and you running a VM within Azure are exactly the same, except that in one case, you will have your hardware. In another case, in cloud's case, the cloud service provider will have their hardware. You will create the VM on top of it. So this is the difference, functional difference that we have with respect to VM with you and VM within Azure cloud. Now, when we think about the VM concepts in AWS or GCP, there also it is the same thing. Technically, it's all the same technology. The hypervisor software which they use in the backend might be different, and the name of the service might be different. But apart from that, the technology is the same thing. It's virtualization, and they are giving you virtual machines, and Azure is also giving you virtual machines. In Amazon, you would call it as Amazon EC2. In Google, you would call it as Google Compute Engine. And in Azure, we call it as Azure Virtual Machines. That's all. These are the terms associated with virtual machine. Now, within Azure, what they have done, every company, when they want to create virtual machines, they would require certain configuration with this VM, right? They would require certain configurations with this VM. Certain configuration in the sense, in those VMs, you would need to have certain amount of RAM, CPU, etc. Right? Certain amount of RAM, CPU, network interface card, all these aspects has to be there. So to decide on all this, how much you need, what is the configuration that you need on a virtual machine, to decide that within Azure, what they have done, they have created various sizes. They have created various virtual machine sizes for you. So these virtual machine sizes, you can choose any size that is according to your requirement, what is needed, that can be chosen while creating the virtual machine within Azure. These sizes also has been classified into various series of VMs. We refer to it as types of Azure virtual machines or series of Azure VMs, namely A series, D series, F series, G series, H, L, M, N series, B series, etc. Various series of VMs you can see under Azure virtual machine. In each of these series, there will be different VM sizes available for you. For example, in A series itself, there may be 10 sizes, 10 different sizes coming under A series. Similarly, we have D series. In D series also, there will be 10, 15, 20 sizes and all coming under in D series, right? Starting from low capacity to high capacity. So in each of the series, you will see that trend. Then what the series signifies over here is that for what type of workload this is mostly, useful. For example, A series, if you go entry level workloads and all, you can run it on A series, not a problem. D series, typical production workload, you will go with either D series or E series. Normal case, normal use cases. But wherever you require very high CPU, rather higher CPU memory ratio, then in that case, you will go with F series VMs. And then you have a higher memory requirement, then in that case, you will go with G series or M series VMs, right? And wherever you need HPCU, high performance computing capabilities, you will go with H series VM. Wherever you require a graphics card, you can create N series VM and so on. So in this way, you will choose what exactly you want, what exactly is the type of VM that you're trying to create, and what is the size that you have to choose. So based on that, you will be able to create a virtual machine within Azure. If Microsoft was to allow customers randomly choose the sizes that they want, then it would have been a very big trouble, right? Because every customer will have varying requirement. One customer will say, okay, I need this. Another customer would say, okay, I need that, right? Different sizes they will mention, and the standardization will not be there. So to avoid that kind of problems, we have to standardize the process as well as the product, right? That is what they have done with Azure Virtual Machine. They have created a certain set of sizes available for you, a standard set of sizes available for you, which is classified into various uh, categories like A series, D series, B series, etc. As I told you. And you and me as a customer would be able to choose the VM sizes that we want from them. That's all. So let's go ahead and create a basic VM within Azure portal. So you know how to access Azure portal. We have done a walkthrough of Azure portal earlier. And I hope you also would have your account ready. Pretty much all of you should be having your Azure account ready now. So once you're into Azure portal, to access the virtual machine, you have to go to the search bar on top and then type virtual machines. This is one way, or directly if it is showing somewhere over here, then you don't have to do that, because you can see already virtual machine is visible for me here. That means I don't have to search for the VM again. I can directly access the VM blade from here. So I'll click on virtual machines, and that will take me to the VM blade, and then I have the option to create a virtual machine. Create what? Create Azure virtual machine. And now it will start asking for the details. So you have to provide all the details that is required for creating this. First of all, it is asking for the subscriptions, on which subscription you want this to be created. So that is given. The resource group, what should be the name of the resource group that needs to be looked up? For example, if I say, currently I don't have any resource group, network watcher RG not useful for us, we'll create one. So I gave a subscription and I gave a resource group name. And then virtual machine name has to be specified. So whatever name that you give over here will become your computer name as well internally within the operating system. So I'm calling it as just VM1. And then I have to choose the region wherein I want to create this VM. So in Central India, that is where I'm creating. You can see, as I told you earlier, there are 62 regions approximately. So those region names will be listed over here. You can choose whichever region close to you. In every geopolitical area, there will be a large capacity region available for you. For example, in India, we know there are three different regions: South India, Central India, and West India. In that, Central India is the data center which has the highest capacity, right? South India and West India are a little bit smaller capacity compared to Central India. So in every region, you will have that. For example, in United States, we have Central US region, which will give you the highest capacity, right? So if you are using your free trial Azure account, then in that case, try to deploy your resources onto that main region of that geopolitical area. I'm not saying you should not deploy to any other region. You can, it's up to you, but you will have likelihood of not facing any failures if you deploy it onto the region which has the highest possible capacity. Anyway, so let's go ahead and specify a region. I have selected Central India. Whichever close to you, you can select it. So in your case, as I told you, close to you, any region that you have, you can select. But from a company perspective, when we are working in a company, how do you choose the VM size that you want? Sorry, the VM region that you want. You have to look at the business requirement. What exactly is the business requirement here? For what purpose we are creating this VM? Who is going to access the VM, right? So if you're creating that VM to host an application for people who are from Middle East, then in that case, you should ideally consider placing your VM somewhere in Middle East itself, or if that is not possible, close to Middle East. In that way, you have to do it, right? Not just that, okay, you have your customers in United States and you deploy your application in South India or Central India. It doesn't work that way. So you have to look at the business requirement and then identify the probable location which wherein you would not face any latency problems and so on. So accordingly, we have to select the region. So I have selected Central India for me, and then I'll proceed to select the operating system image that I want, right? So you can see operating system image, already one Ubuntu image has been selected. I'm changing it on to Windows Server. So let's go with Windows Server 2022 Data Center Edition image. Meanwhile, one or two questions over here. If user needs two series together, in that case, which series should be chosen? For example, user have a requirement for high memory along with high graphics card. So as I told you, N series VMs will give you graphics card, but within N series itself, you will have VM starting from small capacity to higher capacity. So you choose a N series high capacity VM. That's all. So in that case, whatever additional RAM you require will be available for you. That's all. Another question here, what is a resource group? I have explained this in detail yesterday. I don't know if you have missed it. A resource group is nothing but a place wherein you will keep your or you will organize your resources, a logical grouping for any resources that you're creating. Currently, we are creating a resource called as virtual machine. So for that particular virtual machine, you have to specify a logical grouping, and that logical grouping is what we call as a resource group. I have told you the use case of resource group in last class. Resource groups, at the resource group level, you can give permission as to who can access and who cannot access, etc. Those things can be done at the resource group level. Or once you are done with the project, you can immediately delete at the resource group level, which in turn will delete everything. Okay, so that's what we have with respect to the concept of resource group. So let's continue. So I have selected my subscription resource group. I gave a virtual machine name. I selected the region. Availability options, security type and all, don't worry for now. And image is the operating system image. Here we don't install operating system by ourselves, right? In Azure VMs or in any cloud computing environment, you don't install the operating system by yourself, because if you want to install operating system, you need to have a bootable pen drive or CD. You need to insert that into the system and then boot from the drive, which is not possible for an Azure VM, because what you have is only remote access. You don't have direct physical access. So in which case, what you should do, you should drop those onto your, or you should create the operating system by selecting an image, or in on-prem environment, you may have referred to it as a template. You will use an operating system template, or in Azure, we call it as operating system image. You have to use a image. So we will select a image. Microsoft itself has made almost all operating systems images available within Azure Marketplace. You can take those images easily and then add it over here. So that is what you should ideally do. So we have selected the image as Windows Server 2022 Data Center. Many other supported images are also available. You can choose whatever you want. And then we will proceed to select the VM size. So you can see there is an option called as size. It's already selected, standard V2MS, which will give you 2 virtual CPU and 8 GB memory. Such and such a VM has already been selected, a VM size. You can change it if you want to. If you just press on the drop down option, then in that case, you will be able to see other VM sizes, other recommended VM sizes. And then there is see all sizes option as well. So if you go to see all sizes, all other VM sizes which can be used also can be seen. Like for example, B4MS, D series, E series, N series, all the sizes which is available for you can be seen over here. Okay. So you will select whatever works for you from any of this. That's all. You will go and choose the VM size that actually works for you. And if it is there, definitely the things will be just created. That's all. So I'm going with V2MS itself. I'm not changing the VM size. Select V2MS. Now let's continue. But before that, one question here. What is ARM64? That is processor architecture. I will give you a homework. Research on ARM64, 64 as well as 32-bit. x86, x64, ARM64. Three different processor architectures. x86, it's already gone. We don't use x86 anymore, right? 32-bit operating system. We used to have it earlier, but nowadays we don't use it. x64 operating system, that is what very common. That is what we use. The current processor architecture with almost all servers, almost all client machines, we use x64 as the architecture, processor architecture. There is also something called as ARM64. ARM64 processor architecture is for devices which are mobile devices. If your device is mostly mobile device, then in that case, you will be using ARM64 as the processor architecture. Azure does support ARM64 processor architecture as well in some cases with specific images which are compatible with ARM64. That's all. So you will choose the VM size and then you will proceed to, so size we have specified, you will proceed to add the username and password, right? So first of all, let's specify the username. So this username and password, what you're giving over here is for the login to the server. Like once you have created the VM, you would want to log into these servers, right? So to do the login, you will have to use a username and password. So you can use that username and password, or you can give that username and password over here, right? So let's go ahead and specify the username and the password that I want. Remember, this password has to meet the complexity requirements. So it means there should be a capital letter, small letter, all that has to be there. Plus, make sure you don't include whatever the username that you gave. Whatever the username that you gave, make sure it is not included in the password. Because if it is included in the password, then it will create some problems later on. Okay. You might not be able to completely log in successfully. So you have to give the username and password, whatever username and password that you would want, and then you can continue creating. And here, once after you create the VM, by default, Azure will block all connectivity to the VM that you're creating. But again, you know, it's a VM which will be created in Microsoft Azure's data center in their remote infrastructure. So when the VM is created over there, you would need to take RDP onto it. You would need to access that VM, correct? A Windows VM remotely to connect, you use RDP protocol. So you would need to connect to this VM remotely. So to connect onto this VM, first of all, we have to make sure RDP port is open on the VM. If every port is blocked, then you would be in trouble. So you have to make sure RDP port is open. So you select here, there is one option called as inbound port rules, and then say allow selected ports, means allow access through selected ports. And we have selected RDP 3389. If you were having a Linux VM, if you were trying to create a Linux VM, then in that case for Linux VM, you should be using, instead of 3389, which port number, guys? Which protocol and port number for Linux VM to take remote access? Instead of RDP, which one we use? You will have to use port number 22 SSH, right? So you will have to use port number 22 SSH. Right now, we are okay to go with RDP because what we have is a Windows VM. So you proceed to create this now. You say, for example, next. So I will continue with the creation. I have these tabs and all, disks tab, networking management, etc. Those things we can discuss later on. Right now, you don't have to worry about it. And then finally, we can say review plus create. Click on. You can see by the time you confirm everything, it will check all the values that you have given if it is correct. If you are good to create a VM, then it will give you, okay, fine, we are good to create the VM. Validation has been passed. And it will give you a pricing also approximately how much it would cost you. 7.6650 per hour. Subscription charges are for standard B2MS VM. The charge will be 7.6 rupees per hour. Meaning, if I run this continuously for 1 hour, it will cost me 7.6 rupees. That is the point. That is what they are trying to tell you there. But again, this is only approximate value. Actual pricing might be slightly different. This you can take it as a reference, immediate reference. Actual pricing, if you want to, you have to generate it from Azure pricing calculator. You can see here itself, cost given below is an estimate and not the final price. Please use pricing calculator for all your pricing needs. Okay, so that is there. So finally, once after you verify everything you have given, you can click on create. This will initiate, first of all, from here now, a API request. Right now, you can see deployment is in progress. So a API request is getting created, and this API request with all the details, whatever we gave, is getting submitted to Azure platform in the backend. More precisely, within the backend, there is a component called as ARM, Azure Resource Manager, right? So this Azure Resource Manager will receive this request. Azure Resource Manager will validate if you have the proper access token with proper username and password. So if it is there, he will proceed to accept your request, and then it will check what you are asking to be created. So we know we are creating a VM. So VM actually has multiple components associated with, right? A VM will have a disk associated with, there will be a network interface card associated with the VM, the NIC. There is the VM object itself that is there. And then we have the disk or storage that we already addressed, right? So we have resources coming from networking category, or resources coming under storage category, and resources coming under compute category. All these three needs to be created for the VM, right? So what you will do in that case is, or what this ARM, Azure Resource Manager component in the backend will do is that ARM has something called as a subset of ARM called as resource providers. There is something called as resource providers available for you. So these resource providers are software component which is part of ARM, which will receive this request and then accordingly deploy whatever you need. So these ARM resource providers, for example, we have network resource provider or Microsoft Azure.network, and then another resource provider, Microsoft.compute, or one more resource provider, Microsoft.storage. In this way, multiple resource providers are available for you. So these resource providers will be called upon, and they will be handed over the task of creating the respective resources. So meaning, compute resource provider will receive the request to create the VM object. Storage resource provider will receive the request to create the disks of the VM, and network resource provider will receive the request to create the network interface card and anything related to networking. And finally, everything put together, you will have your VM object ready. So it's a parallel deployment that is going on in the backend with the help of multiple resource providers. Once again, to quickly summarize how the deployment happens. So the moment you click on create a VM from here, from Azure portal, an API request is submitted to ARM, Azure Resource Manager. Once ARM, Azure Resource Manager, receives the request, he will hand over the request on to resource providers, respective resource providers. In the case of VM, at least 3 different resource providers will get involved. That is one for compute, Azure.compute resource provider, Azure.storage resource provider, Azure.networking resource provider. So these three resource providers will get involved in the creation of a VM. So each of these resource providers will create their respective areas or their respective services. So for example, Azure.compute will be responsible for creating the VM object. Azure.storage will be responsible for creating the disks associated with Azure VM. And then Azure.compute resource provider will be responsible for creating network interface card and NSG network security group, VNet related things, etc. Okay, so that is what you will be having with respect to the resource deployment and how it happens. So you can see already our resource deployment within hardly how much time it has taken, maybe 3-4 minutes. The resource deployment was over. Now, just a second, guys. Okay, some of you wanted to see this on whiteboard. Let me just explain it to you one more time. I've already explained it twice, but anyway, I'll explain it one more time just on the whiteboard, just so that you are aware as to what is going on. I mean, see, ARM, you just have to have the generic understanding. That is why I explained to you like that. Not a problem. I'll just show you on whiteboard one more time. It is just that you have to have the generic understanding what is happening. The component that is associated with the deployment of the resources. That's all. Anyways, so the point I was trying to make, within Azure portal, or maybe by using CLI /bash, or by using PowerShell, by any of this means, you can also directly create a REST API request also. That is possible, but that is not our cup of cake, so we are not focusing on that. You can use any of this method to do the deployment into Azure, right? So when you do, there are even more methods also. Like for example, you can use language specific SDKs also. Programming languages. Using programming also, you can deploy resources. That is also a supported option. You can also use something called as ARM template. ARM template. This will be covered later on. ARM template. So using any of this, when you try to do some deployment, these deployment requests go on to something called as Azure Resource Manager. Azure Resource Manager. ARM. Right? It's a backend component. It's a component which is there in the backend. You don't have control over Azure Resource Manager. It is something which Microsoft has done and they have it there. We just have to be aware of it. There is a component getting involved over here called as Azure Resource Manager. So the request actually goes on to Azure Resource Manager by any of this method if you try to do the deployment. That is the first thing. Now, once you have the request submitted to Azure Resource Manager, what do you have to do next? Within Azure Resource Manager now, there are resource providers. Various RPs are available for you, right? Various resource providers. For example, with respect to VM creation, there are 3 different resource providers that is getting involved, namely Azure.compute, that is one resource provider, and then Azure.storage, that's another resource provider. Then there is Azure.networking. For any service that you want to create in Azure, there would be separate resource providers available for you. So these resource providers are responsible for creating that specific resource. For example, Azure.compute will be responsible for creating the compute object. compute object in the sense the VM object. Let me rephrase it. The VM object. The VM object will be created by azure.compute, and he will assign the CPU, RAM, etc., everything. And then with that, it will create the VM object. Azure.storage is responsible for VM storage or the disks. And then Azure.networking is responsible for VM networking related resources. VM networking related resources, namely network interface card. There is something called as NSG network security group. There is something called as VNet. Okay. Anyway, we will have a separate discussion on what is NIC, what is NSG, and what is VNet. So you don't have to worry about it. So you have something called as a network interface card, a network security group, a VNet. So for everything, it will be all these three will be coming under the Azure networking. So once after each of these resource providers creates whatever it has been designated with, you will have finally the VM created for you. You will have a working VM available for you once after this has been completed. So this is the overall process that we have with respect to creating a virtual machine. Okay. So not only virtual machine, any resource within Azure when you create it, this is the overall process. There is a resource manager getting involved. Then respective resource provider will come into the picture. They will create all the respective resources. And finally, everything put together, you will have the final resource that you have requested for. That's all. So I hope this part is clear now as to what is happening with ARM, Azure Resource Manager. So now here, just a second. If you go on to Azure portal, just go to subscriptions, search for subscriptions, and under subscriptions, you can see select your subscription. For example, you will have the free trial subscription, right? Azure subscription 1. So click on it. And then within the middle pane, if you scroll down, you can see there is one option called as resource providers. So this is what we have been talking about, right? The resource providers. So these resource providers will be listed over here for your subscription. What are all the resource providers that is available for you, right? Anything which has a status registered is available for you, and you will be able to create resources with it. For example, Microsoft.compute is registered for me. Microsoft.storage is registered for me. Microsoft.network is registered for me. For almost all the use cases, you don't have to do anything over here. This is just that I wanted to show you there are the resource providers available. But in some time, when you try to deploy some service which is not so common, it will tell you the resource provider is not registered, right? You may see an error under the notification bar on top over here saying this resource provider is not registered. Which resource provider? They will mention it over there itself in the error. So then you will have to come back to this resource providers, search for that resource provider which they mentioned, and register for it. And once you click on register, now you will be able to create the resources without any problem. So that is what you have to remember with respect to resource providers. For most part, you wouldn't have to do anything with it. Almost all the required resource providers will be registered by default. But in some cases, if you see any errors, resource provider not registered, dash and dash, resource provider not registered, if you see, now you don't have to panic. You can come back to your subscription, go to resource providers, check if that particular resource provider is registered or not. If it is registered, then fine, you're good enough. That's all. So this is what you have to do, or you have to understand with respect to the concept of resource providers and ARM. And I hope that part is clear. There are a couple of questions. I will address them as we go forward. And regarding the issue that you mentioned in the chat, Vivek, my VM creation failed and the error message allocation failed. We do not have sufficient capacity for the requested VM size in this zone. First of all, while creating the VM right now, you don't have to choose zone. That is the first thing. When you deploy Azure Virtual Machine, there is an option to select zone or infrastructure redundancy, right? So availability options. So say no infrastructure redundancy required. We haven't discussed what is availability zone, what is virtual machine scale set, what is availability set. Don't delve into something which we haven't discussed yet, because that will create you unnecessary confusions. So for now, just keep it as no infrastructure redundancy required. That is the first step. Second step, choose a common VM size, like for example, standard B2MS, D2S V3, D4S V3 kind of common VM sizes, you can use it and then try to do the deployment. If it is still giving the error, allocation failed, no sufficient capacity available, please understand that is because there is no capacity. There is no capacity in the sense that selected VM size is not available in that region where you are trying to do the deployment of the VM. So in which case, what do you have to do? Either change the size to something else, change the VM size to something else and then retry, or change the region to something else. Either of this, if you try, that error will go away and you will be able to create your resources. That's it. That's all what you have to do. And we have completed creating the VM. Let me address a few questions over here. And at least there are 2-3 people who has asked for speak up. I will give you the permissions for those as well. Okay, please hold on. These servers are free trial. No, these servers will be activated and their license cost is involved in the overall cost of the VM. When you create a VM, I told you it was showing you the pricing, how much it will cost you if you run it for 1 hour, right? So for that 1 hour cost is actually including your virtual machine license cost. Okay, that's it. Any free size is there like in AWS. In Amazon Web Services, there is free service, certain free sizes. Similarly, there are free sizes which is available within Azure as well, right? For example, we have something called as B1S VM size. Right? You don't have, you have a VM size called as B1S, which will give you 500 MB of RAM. That's all, not much, just 500 MB of RAM you will get. And you will have one vCPU or so. It's not a very powerful VM, but something which is more than enough to run a Linux instance. Windows instance, you wouldn't be able to run on that VM size. So free size is available. D1S, B1S kind of VM sizes you can use, which are free. That's it. Now, another question is, what is hibernation here? Hibernation is similar to your operating system hibernation. You do hibernation on your operating system, right? For example, my laptop, if I directly just close, what happens? It goes to a hibernate state. Or if I go to the power button, there is also one option called as hibernate. Right now it is not there, but anyway, when you use sleep, basically it is going on to a hibernate state only. So what that does is it will preserve the memory state. For example, you have a couple of applications and all open. Right now in my machine, there is Google Chrome open and couple of other applications. So it will preserve that state and then stop deallocate my machine. Okay, now you will ask, okay, what is stop deallocate? So that is where I said, let's go flow by flow, one by one by one. I have to explain you, first of all, what is stop deallocate, only then this will make better sense to you. But anyway, please understand hibernate is equal to hibernating your local operating system, your local laptop. It will preserve the memory and then stop the VM. That's all. So that feature is what we call as hibernating. It's in preview yet. It is something which has not become commonly available yet. It's still in public preview. Okay, so one more question, I think. In AWS, we need to give keys to create instance. Is it required in Azure? You don't have to. You don't have to give any keys to create VMs in Azure. So far, when we created, you didn't see any of that. So that means you don't have to give any keys. Anyway, Sujin, you can speak up now.
Hi, good morning.
Morning, tell me.
Okay, so here actually when we are creating VMs in that time, so we have one option is like availability zone, right? Example, some region in India, two region we don't have a availability zone. In that cases, how we will select? Example, if I'm choosing that region, then zone what I need to choose.
I didn't get your question.
Okay, so okay, when we created a VM in that time, so we have option is like a region, right?
Hmm?
In this region, in India, one region only we have availability zone.
Hmm?
But if you are choosing unavailable, sorry, it's like yeah, unavailability zone. So in that cases, what we will choose the place of
See, first
zone.
of all, Sujin, one simple ask, have we discussed the topic of availability zone yet?
But it will be the option, right?
No, 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 wait. Simple question. Have we discussed the topic of availability zone yet? Yes or no?
But when you started that time, it was there. Yes.
Option it was there. I told you I addressed this concept of availability zone earlier, and I told you we will discuss that topic later in detail separately. Definitely, I'm pretty sure I have said that. So why I'm saying you this is because right now let's try not to create confusion. Right now, what I'm trying to show you is creating a basic VM within Azure portal. So let's focus on that. There are so many options that you can see on the VM, like as we just explained right now, Hibernate, Sport Instance, that these so many options you will be able to see. It's not possible to explain everything in the first go itself. Let's try to understand step by step. First of all, we'll start by creating a basic VM. Then we will elaborate on, okay, what is VM disk, what is NIC, what is NSG, how to open ports, how to work with availability zones, what is availability set, what is scale set. All these things will be coming later on. Now, regarding the question that you asked, while creating a VM within a company perspective for a production requirement, if you are deploying a VM, first of all, you have to understand what is meant by availability zone. For what purpose we are using availability zone. That needs to be understood first. It is actually a high availability mechanism whenever you deploy your application to make sure this application can survive a VM failure. In Azure, what you will do, you will deploy minimum two instances, and you will place them either in an availability set or you will place them in an availability zone. So in a region, if availability zone is supported, you will create one VM into zone 1, second VM onto zone 2, and if needed, you can create a third VM onto zone 3. Not necessary, but if you want to, you can create as such. But minimum 2 has to be there. Now, if availability zone is not there, then you will use virtual machine scale set or availability set. Either of this you will use. So that's all what you have to do. So if your requirement is you have to have availability zone, then you should choose the region which will give you the option of availability zone. If not, we can go with any other region and you will stick with availability set. That's all.
Okay.
More detailed discussion on that will follow. So don't worry about that. Things will be more making sense when you actually understand what is meant by availability zone. So therein, this question will be much more clear. So we'll talk about that later. Vivek, you can speak up.
Yeah, hi, Sadil. So my question here, in terms of availability zone, already you said that we will discuss further on going forward class.
Mhm.
But here I wrongly choose the subs availability zone here. So can I edit that VM settings and remove that zone and what you suggested for now to make it here selection, or need to delete the VM and
Mm.
make create a new VM how it is?
So once after you place a VM onto availability zone, you cannot modify its zone membership. That is not possible. So
Mm-hmm.
what you have to do is you will have to delete and recreate it. But for now, you don't have to do that. Even if you deployed that VM onto zone 1, that's not going to make any difference for us right now. So you can continue to use that VM. That is absolutely okay. Not a problem at all. But remember, once you place a VM onto a zone, you cannot
Mm-hmm.
modify its zonal membership. it will continue in that state. If you want to make any changes, you will have to have it recreated. That's all.
Okay, I have another question. While creating, VM, I have seen that window license is not available. Okay, so my question here is, when in corporate world, when we are creating any virtual machine, so does company buying the Windows license for VMs, or it's by default available for all the VMs?
By default in Azure, all Windows VMs will be automatically activated. There is something called as KMS online activation. So these
Mhm.
VMs, once they are created, they will communicate with the respective Azure KMS service and they will receive a license automatically. So all the VMs, all the Windows VM, let it be Windows Server 2012 R2, 2016, 2019, 2022, any of them when they create, they're
Mhm.
all in activated state. They're not free trials or trial edition of operating system. They're fully activated edition of your operating system. And the cost of that license is actually converted to something called as OPEX model. We have discussed it, operational expenses, in the sense
Mhm.
like you will, instead of typically when we buy a license, you upfront pay the actual amount of the complete license, maybe 60,000, 1 lakh, 1.5 lakh, whatever the cost, maybe you will pay that and you will get a license which is valid for lifetime. But instead of that here, now that cost is getting converted to your OPEX, operational expenditure. And then whenever you use the VM, whenever you are having that VM running, during that period, the actual cost which comes per hour, within that, the operating system license cost is also included.
Add-on. It will be
Yeah,
add-on on
that's
that.
all. So that is the way how it works.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Fair enough. One more question here. Can we stop/start Azure VMs like we do in EC2? Yes, you can stop, you can start, you can restart. All that is possible for Azure VMs. So now let's go to this VM that we have created, VM1. When you click on it, you can see the status of the VM. Currently, the virtual machine is running. Operating system, whatever we selected, you can see that. The size that we selected and what you will get with that size. 2 virtual CPUs and 8 GB memory. That is also mentioned over here. There is a public IP address given with the VM. There is a virtual network and subnet. We will discuss on this later. What is virtual network? What is subnet? Okay, right now, nothing to worry about. Now, anyway, status of the VM and where it is running, that also you can see, including your subscription, on which billing agreement this is going to be billed. So for this VM, whatever bill it generates, it will be billed on to Shadil's training subscriptions. Right now, I have here. That's it. So now what I want to is that I want to connect onto this machine. I want to log into this machine and then see I whether the VM is working as expected. What are the things that I have? I want to see how much RAM capacity CPU I have got. All these details I want to see. So what will I do? Either I can click on connect option on top and then say click on connect. Don't worry about the bastion. We will discuss that separately. So just click on connect. It will give you an option. It will do a couple of checks and say whether it is accessible for you or not. And then it will give you an option to download RDP file, native RDP file. So click on download RDP file and that will give you a .rdp file for you. So when you click on this .rdp file, it will automatically initiate the connectivity and it will ask for the username and password. So now it's just that you have to write down, or you have to put down the username and password, whatever you created, whatever you chose while creating the VM, and this you will be able to log in. So this is one way. Once again, you can go back to the connect option and click on connect, and in which case it will give you the option to download the RDP file. You download it. Once you click on the RDP file, it will ask you for the username and password. And once you give the username and password, you will be able to log in. This is one way. Another way, you don't have to do all that. Directly, just copy. I mean, once you're in the overview page, just copy the public IP address. You have the option to copy to clipboard. So just copy this, go to Windows plus R, that is run Windows plus R, and type msdsc. What is MSTSC, by the way, guys? MSTSC is used for a shortcut to open up your remote desktop connection. To open up the RDP Connect window, you can use the shortcut. So say MSTSC, just say /v colon provide the IP address. So MSTSC/v and give the public IP address. So once you give this much, you click on OK. Whatever you saw earlier, that RDP window will come up now. So click on OK, and you can see now it is automatically giving me the RDP window asking for the username and password. So I will give use a different account. Why I'm clicking on use a different account? Because right now the account over here is a Microsoft account, which is not what I have created for my VM. My VM have a local account which I have specified with a username and password. So that username and password, whatever I gave while creating the VM, needs to be shared over here. So I'll give the username Shadil and whatever password I created for this VM, and then I will click on OK. So if it is valid, it will give you the certificate related warning. Do you want to trust and continue? That's okay. You don't have to worry about it. Say yes, and you will be logged in to the VM. That's all. So now, once we have one question here, once we have created the VM, if we need to increase the machine configuration, how we will do that? We'll discuss. Hold on. We'll discuss that. Where is private IP address? I'll show you. Please post your questions on to Q&A, by the way. Okay. Those of you who are writing the questions on chat, please put it on to Q&A going forward. Anyway, now we have logged into the machine. And once we are inside the machine, we want to see whether the configuration that has been given to us. You can see what is the size we selected from Azure portal. What is the size we selected from Azure portal for this VM? Who remembers? What was the size we selected? B2 MS. You are giving me the configuration 2 virtual CPU 8 GB. That is right. But the configuration was B2 MS. The size was B2 MS, right? So we selected B2 MS as the VM size, which will give me 2 virtual CPUs and 8 GB of RAM capacity. So that is what we have. So let's go ahead and check if we have 2 virtual CPUs and 8 GB RAM capacity. You can do that from Task Manager. So just go to the Task Manager and validate what you have. Go to more details, go to Performance tab. You can see 8 GB RAM is available. With respect to CPU, we have 2 virtual processes. Okay, so we have a working VM with 8 GB RAM and with 2 virtual processes or 2 vCPUs running right now. So that is what we have with respect to the configuration. We have successfully created the VM with that and we have logged in. Okay, that's all. Now just to show you, just for the sake of curiosity, on this server, I'm setting up a middleware now. I'm setting up a middleware on this server. Let's proceed with the next. And then this is the server manager, by the way. Within Windows Server, to configure the Windows Server, you will use Server Manager, right? Server Manager will be automatically started once you log in. So from Server Manager, to install some roles or to make changes to the server and to add any roles or what we call as any features, etc. If you want to add to the server, you will use manage, add roles and features. This is actually part of your Windows administration. But anyway, just go to add roles and features. And from here, you can install the role called as web server. It is basically the, I have told you about the middleware earlier, right? So this is basically a middleware, web server, IIS or middleware. I'm installing it. I will proceed with the next and then have it installed, right? So once after I install this web server, this machine will be able to host a website as well. And the same website can be made publicly available to anywhere in the world. So let's try that as well. And then we will go for Q&A session. If you have any doubts, we will address that. Just wait for the web server to get installed, or basically the middleware. So you can see the installation is succeeded on the machine. So we need to test it now. So to test if the web server is working internally, I can go to the browser within the server, and then I'll just go to localhost. If I just type localhost, I will see if it is working on my local machine or not. So you can see on localhost, it is working just fine. So let's try with the public IP address, right? So let's take the public IP, which is 20.219.196.1.1. Let me share this public IP address with you. Let me just drop it into the chat. We will access the website via HTTP protocol. So I have added HTTP. Click on that and see if it is giving you any response or not. So that would be the HTTP URL with which you will access the default website. Currently, we have only the default website. Actual website is not there, right? Only default one we have. So that default website, whether you are able to access it or not by clicking on the link, just see that now. Report back if you're able to see. So what is happening right now, if I click on the link and try to access it, you can see it is simply saying loading and it is not coming up, right? It's not giving me anything. Why it is not giving me anything? I gave you the reason as well earlier. The reason being, by default, I told you all ports on a VM will be blocked by default, right? And in that, we earlier opened up or allowed connectivity via RDP 3389 only via 3389 RDP. Right now, this protocol or this connection is going through HTTP. So we need to allow access via HTTP as well. That is why it is not working. So you can go to this networking tab and click on network settings. And there would be an option to open up the port number for HTTP. You can see RDP is already open. It is there. So here you go on to network settings tab. Just scroll down under your network security group. Click on create a port rule. Select inbound port rule option. Click on create port rule. Select inbound port rule option and just select RDP under services. Under service, just select not RDP but HTTP. Select HTTP. Rest of the things you don't have to change. Just scroll down and see the action is allow. Make sure the action is set to allow and click on add. That's all what you have to do. So you have to go to network settings, scroll down to network security group, create inbound port rule, and then select the service as HTTP and make sure it is allowed. You can see. So once it is created, now you will be able to see your website. Go ahead and refresh that page and see if it is coming now or not. Go back to your browser, refresh the page and see if it is now coming. You can see now it is loading. Okay, that is once after we made the security change, it has started allowing the connectivity. We're able to see the default page. So anywhere across the world, now you will be able to see this. So here, if you replace this website now, this default IIS page, if you were to replace it with your actual code, now you will be able to see that website over here instead of Internet Information Services default web page. So this is how we go about a VM, creating a basic VM within Azure portal. There are many options related to it. So that, as I said, as we go forward, we will be discussing those options. Right now, we have just explained you basics of VMs, and then we have created one basic Windows VM. That's all. Some of the questions over here, let me answer them. Can we log into this machine? Yes, we have already logged in. So hopefully you're clear regarding that. Where is a private IP in the VM? So within inside the VM, probably you would know how to check the private IP. I'm inside the VM right now. Inside the machine, if you want to check, you can go to command prompt And within there, you can give IP config. So you will be able to see the private IP. Right now, it is set to 10.0.0.4. The same thing can be seen from Azure as well. If you go back to Azure portal, if you go back to overview, here you can see, scroll down a little bit, and you can see private IP address 10.0.0.4 is visible for you. That's all. So you can see the private IP address as well as public IP address within Azure portal. Another question, can we customize this public IP as per the client requirement? Public IP address cannot be customized. Public IP address is like a pool of IP address is available in the backend, and from that backend pool, automatically a public IP address is selected for you, right? You cannot say, I want this specific public IP address. Whatever they give you, you have to take it. That's all. So public IP address cannot be customized. What about Mac OS? How can we connect to a VM from Mac OS? Simple. Within Mac OS, download this RDP for Mac. Download this guy, RDP, Remote Desktop Application for Mac. You can see it is available within the App Store. This is the application you have to install, Microsoft Remote Desktop. So once you install this, therein you will have the option to add a connection, specify the public IP address, and you will be able to connect onto it. That's all. So please download this app on your MacBook or including iPhone, etc. Apple devices, you can use that. For Ubuntu, how we can connect VM? Please give example for Linux machine creation. That's what we are doing. Please hold on. We just started with one, so we will go there. Please hold on. What is inbound and outbound? Don't worry about that now. NSG Network Security Group discussion will come later. So therein, you will have a clarity on that. What is inbound, outbound? Remote desktop connection, because of a protocol error, remote session will be disconnected. Please try connecting to the remote computer again. While connecting with RDP, extended error core 0x112f timestamp whatever. Okay, so that is some issue that you have on the operating system. We would need to further investigate this to understand what could be the cause of the problem. Try to stop that machine and then start again. Then try to take RDP. There is a stop button on your VM here. So click on the stop button, and once it is stopped, start it again. The start option will appear after you stop it. And once you start it again, try to connect once again and see if that works or not. Okay, that's all. And what else? Can we log in RDP to VM using private IP? Yes, but there is additional configuration required for that. Right now, you will be able to log in only with public IP. Private IP, if you want to use, you have to have some additional configurations for that. That we will discuss when we go on to advanced networking. Time zone is different. Even VM is in Central India. That doesn't matter. A VM, whether it is created in Central India, South India, Central US, it doesn't matter. It will always default to the time zone, which is UTC. Always the Windows operating system will default onto UTC time zone. You have to manually update it. Okay, according to what you want, what time zone you want, you have to manually update it. Once it is done, you will be good. That's all. Does AWS is more secure than Azure while creating VM, as AWS gives option to use key pair login? First of all, remember Windows operating system doesn't support key pair login. For Linux, it is there. So if you're creating a Linux machine within Azure, there also it is there. How to connect VM using Ubuntu OS? Already answered it. Please hold on. We will go there. That was the answer. So please hold on. Need a break? Definitely, we are going for a break. And Ashutosh, you want to speak up, seems like. Okay, give me a sec. Can you raise your hand, please, so that I can pick you up easily? You're good to speak. Yes, proceed. You have to unmute yourself. Yes.
Yeah. Hey, hi, Shatil. So my question is like, as per I have asked, can we customize our public IP address? So the answer which I received like no. But my question is, we have the cloud team, and whenever they are creating the VM, they are giving some specific IP address, like series wise, like 10.159, 10.159.1, 10.159.2. So that was much confusion over here. How they are giving the specific series number?
First of all, 10 series is not public IP address, that is private IP. Anything starting with 10 dot will be
Okay.
private IP, that is not a public IP. And for private IP, definitely yes, you can give it in series, not a problem.
Okay, that means private IP can be customized.
Exactly.
Okay, fine. That was my question.
Fair enough. Another question here for cloud partial enabling, it asks me for storage. I choose yes. Is that cost me extra in free tier? No, that cost will not be much significant amount. It will be very small amount only. Once your practice is done, just delete all resource group and then you will be good. Okay, that won't create you any problems. Don't worry. So we'll go for a break, guys. Thereafter, we will do an example on Linux machine, and hopefully we can see if at all anything else also can be discussed. So see you after the break now. Meanwhile, if you have any other question, please feel free to drop it onto Q&A and we'll have them responded after the break. Okay, let's continue. Hope everyone is back. Okay, so we will do an example on Linux VM as well now. A Windows VM example we have already seen. We created a simple Windows VM and we tried how you can take access or how you can connect onto that machine, right? Anyway, so here with respect to a Linux machine creation, the steps are exactly the same. Only the way how you would log in would be probably different. But apart from that, rest of the things will be just pretty much the same, except some minor difference with respect to login, if at all you want to do that. So I'm going with Azure Virtual Machine Creation option, and I will choose the same resource group which we created earlier. That's okay. You can use the same resource group. Virtual machine name, I'm calling it as Linux VM. Linux VM. And you have to choose the region as Central India. Availability zones, I told you no need. Availability options for now, leave it as no infrastructure redundancy required. Then there is the image. So when you scroll down, you can choose the appropriate image that you want. Like for example, here we have Ubuntu server. So I'm going with Ubuntu itself, Ubuntu server 20.4. That's what I'm choosing. And then continue to create the VM. Size, it's okay to go with standard B2MS itself. And as we know, I haven't shown you that, but as you know, you can change the sizes and all later if you want to. Currently, whatever you're choosing, if you want to, you can alter that later. Okay, where exactly you can do that, that we will see later. Now you have to specify your authentication type. With respect to Linux, two types of authentication are supported. SSH key authentication as well as username and password, the traditional method of login. Either of them are supported. So you could choose which option you would want to go with, right? So if you prefer a SSH public key login on the Linux machine, then you can do so. Or if you want to go with the username and password, you can simply change it to password. Give a username and password, confirm password, and you will be able to create the VM. Either way, you can do it. Anyway, username and password we know. So I'm going with SSH public key this time. So whenever you create a public key login or SSH key login, there also you have to specify a username. So the username I'll give it as, for example, Shadil. And then public key source, generate a new key pair. You will leave Azure itself to create a new key pair. So Azure will automatically create the record key pair for you, and they will allow you to download it when you create the VM. So let's say generate a new key pair. We can give it a name. I'm keeping it as the same name as the VM. So I'm calling it as Linux VM key pair. Linux VM key. That's what the name that I'm giving. And then inbound port, which port I would need to allow. We know RDP is not there in Linux machine. Linux machine doesn't have remote desktop protocol. That is only for Windows, right? But what we have in Linux is something called as SSH secure shell access. Before SSH, we used to have Telnet, but Telnet, since it is not so secure, we don't use Telnet anymore. So you will go by SSH. So select SSH protocol, port number 22. You're saying, okay, keep it open. Keep the SSH port number 22 open. So continue with the next. And then you have to proceed to create the virtual machine. These tabs, disks, networking management, etc. I told you for now. You don't have to worry. Just say review plus create. And that will validate all the selections that you have made and will allow you to create the VM. Okay, so all the details, everything is good. Let's click on create. You can see download private key and create the resource. So click on download private key, and the key file Linux VM key.pem file has been downloaded. So we can use that for logging in later on. Regarding your question, what is meant by hibernation? I already explained it before the break once. Probably you have missed it. Okay, hibernation I clearly explained earlier. But anyway, hibernation means putting your VM into sleep mode. Sleep mode in the sense it will preserve the memory state. Whatever applications and all you have kept open, they will remain as such. If you do a restart, if you do a stop, etc. In such cases, whatever application you kept open, etc. will be lost, right? So you can turn off a VM. At the same time, you can keep its memory state. That is what we call as hibernation. It is still in preview, not yet available until you register for the preview. So you can see your deployment is complete. Let's go to this Linux VM. So once you go over there, similar to what you saw with your Windows VM, you have the public IP address and all those details, right? Public IP address, automatically they assigned you one, and you can see you want to connect onto this machine now. We selected B2MS itself as a size. There is 2 virtual CPU, 8 GB RAM capacity available for you. Okay. So let's try to connect on to this guy. I'll click on copy. I'll copy this public IP address. How do I connect now? I need some client which will help me to connect via SSH. So to connect via SSH, I can use many clients are available. For example, there is something called as PuTTY, which is most commonly used. But the problem with PuTTY is that PuTTY doesn't support PEM key. .pem keys are not supported by PuTTY. So you will have a limitation. You will have to convert that key to a supported format by PuTTY, right? Instead, what you can use, there is something called as MOBA Xterm. You can download this guy, by the way. MOBA Xterm, you can download it. So you don't have to go through any conversion and all that. MOBA Xterm, you can get it from here. MOBA Xterm.mobatech.net from this URL. So let me share this URL with you. So from there, you can download either the portable edition or installable edition, whatever. You can download it. And once you download it, you start MOBA Xterm, take your public IP and go to MOBA Xterm and then say you want to create a new session. Click on a new session. What type of session? An SSH session. And then here you have to specify the IP address of the remote host, meaning your VM's IP address. We gave a username as well. To specify username was Shadil. Port number on which we connect on will be 22 because SSH port number is 22. And then click on advanced SSH settings. And here you have an option to use a private key. You can see use a private key. So click on use this private key and browse for the key file. We have already downloaded the key file. It's there in the downloads, Linux vmkey.pem. So choose that file and then click on OK. So this will open up the connectivity. It will ask, do you want to connect? So say yes, accept the connection. And now you have successfully logged in. Okay, so you are inside the Linux VM. You can see Shadil at the rate Linux VM. It is written over here. Correct. So this is what we have with respect to logging it into a Linux machine by using or after creating. Okay, by using a SSH key pair. And so which is the application I used? MOBA Xterm. I told you can download that from this particular URL. From this URL, download the MOBA Xterm to your local machine. You can get the portable edition. It is available over here, home edition, right? Click on download now and you will be able to get the file. Once you download it, you can start MOBA Xterm. And within MOBA Xterm, you have to create a new session. Go to the session tab, click on add a session, choose a session type. So we are connecting to a Linux machine. So we have to go SSH. Specify the public IP address of the machine over here. Specify the username that we give. Click on advanced SSH settings. Select use private key and point to the private key which we downloaded while creating the VM. Once you have given this much, click on OK and it will connect. That's all. One question, can't we connect Linux directly from VM like in AWS? Directly from VM means from which VM? I'm connecting from my local laptop. So which VM are we referring to? Ravi, let me know. Remote host will be the public IP address. Yes, that will be the public IP address. That is correct. Okay, Ravi, want to speak up? You're good to speak up.
Hi, Shad. Yeah, actually in AWS, after created the VM, okay, if I click on connect, directly it will open Linux.
Come again, I did not get it.
In AWS, after created the VM,
Mhm.
okay, select the VM and click on the connect. Directly, it will be Linux will be open directly
Okay.
in AWS. Like that in Azure, like that. Is there any option like that?
So when you click on directly connect within AWS portal, will
Yeah,
it
directly it
open
will.
a wait, let me complete. Will it open a terminal over here, a command terminal here in the browser? Yes,
Yes.
or no?
Yes, in
Okay.
AWS, yes.
Okay. So in Windows, sorry, in Azure, you have something called as Cloud Shell. We have discussed on it, correct?
Yes.
So within Cloud Shell, there is something called as Bash. Bash
Yes.
and PowerShell, two things I told you. So if you
Yes.
have a Bash enabled within Bash, yes, you can write a command, and with that command, you will be able to log in directly within the portal itself. In fact, I think Muhammad Sajaz has given the command SSH space -I, then specify the key file, then at the
Yes.
rate public IP address with the username. If you give, you will be able to log in there. So correctly, if you give that, and if you have a valid path for the key file, it will open within the terminal. That is a possible scenario.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Fair
Got it.
enough.
Yeah. Thank you. Bye.
And what else? So, okay, Nitya Deepika want to speak. Yes, you're good to speak.
Hello. Hi, Shadul.
Yes. Yes.
Hi. So I have little experience on AWS, and like Azure is pretty new to me. This is my first class. I missed the previous classes. Is it possible to help me with the recordings?
It is already there. Where you can access it is lms.indelipat.com. I think they would have given you the access already. Now,
Okay.
you have to go to this particular URL, lms.indelipat.com, as you can see on the screen. I'm sharing this in the chat anyway. So therein you will have to use your Gmail account, your Gmail ID. Password will be shared by Indelipat management team. If you have not got it, please
Okay.
ask them to share it with you. And then make sure the course is assigned. When you log into this lms.indelipat.com, it will give you all courses option. So go to, sorry, my courses option. So go to my courses, and you will be able to see the course name that you have enrolled for. Click on start course, and there will be a section called as live classes. Click on it and you will be able to see the recording. That's all what you have to do.
Okay. And
Okay, fair
this
enough. Yes.
course starts from these basics of Azure, isn't it? Or like for the
Basics
maintenance?
of Azure, that is what we discussed in last two classes. So what we have done so far, we have completed classes on 26th, 27th already, wherein we discussed a few things. So that is what you're missing. So you should make those up by going through the recording for these 2 days. That will be total 4 hours of class. Please go through that. And once you go through that, you will be able to get a clarity. Now, if not, if you're not able to follow with that, then I would suggest that you join another batch, which probably they are starting very soon, in which on time, I mean exactly on the starting itself. But hopefully you will be able to make it up with that recording. If you can watch it today itself, then that would be really, really great.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Fair enough. And couple of other questions here. Can't we connect Linux directly from, okay, it's already answered. Can we connect to Ubuntu? See, Linux, Ubuntu, it's all same thing. Okay, within Linux, in Windows servers, you have Windows Server 2016, 2019, etc. Various versions. Similarly, in Linux, since it is open source, we have various flavors of Linux. We have, for example, Ubuntu Linux, RHEL, Red Hat Enterprise Linux, and then there is CentOS, Solaris. Many various versions of Linux is available for you, right? So when we say we are trying to connect on to Linux, or what we have demonstrated on Linux already, we logged into a Ubuntu VM, by the way, it's all the same thing. I mean, in all Linux operating system, you will use the pretty much same process itself for logging in. So regarding your question, can we connect to Ubuntu? We already connected to Ubuntu, and I have explained you how you can log into a Ubuntu machine. That is already done. If you have any doubts how to do that, or if it is not clear, then feel free to ask. This question is regarding subscription. Is subscription similar to account ID in AWS? I'm not sure because I'm not an AWS guy, so I wouldn't be able to tell you that. Okay, let me check for you if you want to know. Account ID in AWS. So, such as that uniquely identifies an AWS account. Many AWS users include the account ID in their Amazon resource names. The account ID portion distinguishes resource one on from resource in another account. Okay. Subscription in AWS. AWS complete usage bit over 160. See, you have subscription itself in AWS. AWS account ID is not equal to Azure subscription. Azure subscription is equal to AWS subscription itself. Per my understanding, in Amazon also you have something called as a subscription. In Azure, definitely you have Azure subscription. Okay, so subscription is the billing agreement. Account ID is a unique identifier for your account that is comparable to something called as tenant ID within Azure. But this tenant ID we have not discussed yet. That we will discuss later. So the account ID will be most likely equal to tenant ID. Okay, that would be addressed later on. So what else? Couple of other questions as well. Please hold on. How to identify between Windows VM and Linux VM by looking at the portal. Pretty easy. I'll show you how you can see that. Just a second. So when you come back to Azure portal, let's say for example, I'm here in the Azure portal. Within Azure portal, go to virtual machines tab. Question is how I can see if a VM is Linux or Windows by looking at the portal. You have to look at the operating system. Okay. So therein clearly you can see whether it is a Windows or Linux. Or even if you go inside any machine, for example, you click on one of the machine over here. There also it will show you on the first upper right corner, you can see operating system, Linux Ubuntu 20.4. If you go to second VM, VM1, you can see Windows Server 2022 Data Center Azure Edition. You can see that. That will tell you whether it is a Windows machine or Linux machine easily. You don't necessarily have to log in. Okay, that's it. So pretty much that's it. So let's continue on the VM. So what we have seen so far is creating a basic VM. Now we have to explain you what is Azure Virtual Machine Disks and what are the options available for you with respect to VM, and more details like, for example, what is network interface card, NSG. All these details will follow as we go forward. Now let's have a look at this virtual machine that we created within Azure portal. So when you go onto this virtual machine over here, as I have told you already, you can see, for example, if you go to any one of them, you can see there are three options, like not three, but there are more. But look at this: start, restart, and stop. Right? Start, restart, and then stop. There is a difference between all three options. When a virtual machine is not running, to start it, you can use the start button. Restart, we know, just like when we restart an operating system, same thing. To restart your VM, you can use the restart button. Then there is a stop button. Stop is basically used for stopping the VM completely. But there is more to understand with respect to the stop option, and that will be discussed as we go forward. There is something called as a stop deallocate operation and a normal stop operation. When you click on stop from Azure portal, i.e. this option over here, that is basically stop deallocate option. So what is stop deallocate? That we will tell you when we talk about Azure Virtual Machine desks. And then in addition to that, on the left hand side, when you scroll down, there is one option called as boot diagnostics. Boot diagnostics. So if you go to this boot diagnostics, you can see the current screen of the VM. What happens is that sometimes when you create the VM, once it is created, you might not be able to log into it correctly, right? When you try to take RDP or SSH, you may see errors. So you wouldn't want to, or you would want to know what exactly is going wrong, why we are not able to log in. Troubleshooting, we call it as. You want to understand what went wrong. So to do that, from Azure perspective, you can use this option called as boot diagnostics. What boot diagnostics does is that it will allow you to see at what state your VM currently is. It will take a screenshot of your VM and show it to you under the boot diagnostics area over here. But this has to be enabled. While creating this, by default, it is enabled. So if you have explicitly disabled it, to see that, you have to have this enabled. Okay, you have to have boot diagnostics configured. There is actually a configure button available or settings button available on top. Clicking there, you will be able to enable it if at all it's not enabled. So that's the point. This boot diagnostic basically allows you to see where your VM is currently. Is it on the login screen, or is it stuck on a reboot loop? Is there a blue screen of death error, etc.? All this kind of things you will be able to make out by looking at the boot diagnostics tab. So remember that option. At any point in time, if you're not able to log into the machine, then this particular option can be utilized. Okay. And there is more to talk about. There is something called as redeploy, reapply, and all of that. But for that, we have to understand a little bit about the backend. I have to explain you how exactly the VM is created in a backend host, right? There is something which I want to tell you, but right now there is no enough time. So I'm keeping it for the next class, that is tomorrow. So therein, once I explain you that, we will discuss the redeploy options and what is stop deallocate, what happens when you click on stop deallocate, etc. will be covered over there. Okay, that's it. So now the next 10 minutes we can utilize for addressing any questions that you might have on this topic that we have discussed so far. There is actually a Bastion option also, which is also used for connecting onto the machine, and that also will be discussed along with networking. Then it will come as a separate topic itself. One question here, what is the connect button for? Is that to directly connect to VM instead of using the PEM key? No. The connect option, whether it is Linux machine or Windows machine, won't let you directly connect onto the machine itself. You have to go through a process. Okay, so you have to, like for example, you come back to the overview. Let's for instance go to the Linux VM. So when you click on connect, what happens? It will give you two options, connect via Bastion or just connect. When you click on connect via Bastion, it will take you to the Bastion service, which we haven't discussed yet. When you click on connect, it will just show you the methods or the options with which you can access the machine. So one is that you can see SSH using Azure CLI, right? And you can see here native SSH, another option is also available for you. So when you select native SSH, what happens? It will allow you to take access to this public IP address by using SSH. So when you click on select, what happens? You can see here, they will tell you what are the things that you have to do for connecting onto the operating system. Open a local shell on Windows, open a terminal Windows 11, PowerShell Windows 10 or less, or a shell of your choice. That can be Mobile Extreme as well. And therein you have to type the command, copy and execute SSH command, and provide a path to your SSH private key file to your local machine. So in my machine, I have the private key file under downloads, right? Let me copy the path over there, show in folder. So this is the path. So if I specify the path over here, they will give me the command, what exactly I have to use. Right? C users slash downloads. And then within that, the file name would be, what is that? Linux VM key.pem. Linux VM key.pem, you can see. So now the command ssh to VM with specified private key, that will be ssh space dash I. Right? I is used for specifying the private key file. And then Shadil at the rate, Shadil is a username at the rate 20235109, whatever. That is the public IP address of the machine. So when you give this particular path, what happens? You will be able to log into that machine with it. So that's what we have with respect to your SSH command. Now the same thing you can do via the Cloud Shell as well. Within Cloud Shell, we know Cloud Shell we created yesterday, right? So there also you can use a similar command, sorry, the command like this. But the thing is that you will have to update the path with the key file after uploading the key file onto your bash. Into the bash, you can upload the file. And once after you upload the file onto bash, you have to set a permission for that file. And then once after you set the permission, you have to specify the path on which you have the SSH key file within bash. And thereafter, when you execute the command, you will be able to connect directly through the bash prompt as well. So these are the options with respect to connecting onto the Linux machine. Okay, that's it. So here is the option to set up the access and all. You can say chmod 400 and SSH key, etc. It is available here. Maybe just in case if you wanted to see, let's do that. Let me go to portal.azure.com. And here if I start a Cloud Shell, specify the subscription that you have on which you want this to be created. Get storage. Wait for it. So you got the file, right? So sorry, you got the bash. So upload the file over here. The PEM key is already downloaded onto your local machine. So to upload it, you can use this option, upload, download file. So click on upload, and then you can just select the file from downloads, Linux VM key.pem, right? And where it has been uploaded, it has been uploaded to /home/Shadil. This is the directory where it has been uploaded. So that is where they said, if you want to move that key into a specific path, you can move it, right? For example, move /mnt/c and then your private key file and -ssh. You can create a folder and therein you can move the file if you want to. It's up to you. Or if you want to keep it on the same path, then that is fine. You just have to specify a correct permission for that. So I'm setting the correct permission for that. I will use the command chmod 400 and then I'll specify the path to the private key file. So you can see here, chmod 500 is the permission. Sorry, 400, I'm sorry. Chmod 400. And what is the path of the file? You could see the file path was / what is the file path? I think it uploaded the file onto, sorry. It's in the same path, which is the home path itself, right? Linux VM key /shadil/home. That would be the path. Okay. Okay. So here, chmod 400 linux VM key.pem, and then I will use the command ssh -i linux VM key.pem shadil @ what is the public IP address? Public IP address was 2235.109. Let me copy that. 2235.109, whatever. Are you sure you want to continue connecting? Type yes. And you can see you have logged in. So you can see you're already logged in with the console directly. So in this way, we can do this. So currently with this command, I'm logged into the Ubuntu machine. So right now, whatever command I'm executing over here will be running on that particular virtual machines that I have. Okay. That's it. You can see Shadil @ Linux VM. We are logged into the Linux VM. So once you are done with whatever you want to do, once you're done with it, you can say exit, and then the connection will be closed and you will be back onto Cloud Shell. So either of this method can be utilized. So I hope this part is also clear now. What is the connect button for? It's already explained. What is the connect button for? Is that directly to connect to the VM? Already answered. Instead of using the PEM key, if you don't want to use the PEM key, then you should use the username and password, right? But while creating the VM, we selected the authentication method as what? We selected the authentication method as SSH key login. So in which case we have not given a password. So if you wanted to go back to username and password, for that user account, you will have to set a password. You will need to reset it, and then you will be able to use it. There is actually reset option available within Azure portal. And then if you want to, you can specify a password for the username. That's all. Another question, every time we stop VM, is public IP address going to change when we start again? It will not. The public IP address, whatever you have, will be always static public IP address by default. It will not change. If you wanted to see that in action, let me go back to one of the VM over here and let's try to restart that guy. Okay. Restart or stop and start, whatever you want to do. If I do a stop on this right now, these connections will get closed by the way. That's okay. Yeah. VM is still stopping. So you can see here now with this successfully stopped VM, but let's refresh this page and see if the public IP address is removed when the VM is stopped. VM is stopped, public IP address is still there. I can start. So you can see now the VM is started, but still the IP address is just the same, right? IP address has not been changed. If you try to connect with the same public IP address, you will see you are still able to connect to it without any problem. That's all. So means public IP address will not change because it's a static public IP address. When you click on the public IP address, you will be able to see that IP address assignment is static. So it doesn't matter whether you restart your VM, stop your VM, the public IP address will remain the same without any problem. One question, show once enable Azure CLI using downloading CLI setup, please. Okay. With respect to downloading and setting up CLI on your local machine, just search in Google or just say download Azure CLI. I have given you the link for this within the file which I shared with you, and go to install Azure CLI for Windows. If you have a Windows machine, scroll down, you will have the option to download latest release of Azure CLI, either 64-bit or 32-bit. So download the Azure CLI. Once after you download the setup, you have to install it on your machine. Installing means we know how you install any software. Same thing. Just click on next, and then complete the installation. So once you install it, now you will have AZ or AZ commands or bash CLI commands enabled on your local machine. So once the installation is done, you can open up either command prompt or you can use PowerShell. Both of them would work. And then you can start executing the Azure CLI commands. Example Azure CLI commands and all I have given you within that script file itself. So you may use any of them. That's all. Azure and MCSA is same or different? MCSA and Azure is not same. MCSA certifications are for Windows operating systems, Windows Server operating systems, and someone who's administering Windows Server operating system, they can do MCSA. And for administering Azure, we have AZ104. That is the examination port. That's all. So Azure and MCSA is not same. This pop-up window didn't come for me. Try once again. It will come. It should come. Once after you downloaded the file, you should be able to double click and install this without any problem. That's it. So any other questions, guys? Any other questions on anything that we discussed? We have introduced you onto the concept of VM. You can practice by creating VM. More things will follow as we go forward on the topic of virtual machines. If you have any questions, feel free to ask, or if you are clear, we would call this a day and we'll continue in tomorrow's class. If any of you wanted to speak up or ask any questions, etc., please feel free to do so. Or if you are good, just say that and we are good to leave the class. How to terminate Linux VM? Oh, okay. So whatever resource that you created over here right now, you can delete them off. How do you do that? Go back to your resource group. Do not forget this part, by the way. Go back to your resource group. So you got demo RG resource group. And since we started Cloud Shell, there is a Cloud Shell Storage Central India resource group as well. So make sure you delete both. So double click on this demo RG, copy this, click on delete resource group and paste the resource group name over here. And after that, click on delete. That's all. So this will remove all the VMs, all resources that has been created, everything will be removed, including VM, everything. And then Cloud Shell Storage Central India also we have to delete it. This should be a standard practice for you whenever you practice it. Not in a production environment, but when you practice it, this should be the standard thing that you have to do because we don't want to create unnecessary costing. Okay, that's all. That's all. So I hope that's clear. Let's call it a day and we'll continue in tomorrow's class with rest of the things on the VM. Till then, all of you have a good day. Bye-bye. See you tomorrow. One question, what if there are 10 VMs deployed and I want to terminate only 2 VMs in the same resource group? You select those 2 VMs individually. Go to the resource group and therein you can see the individual VMs. You select them individually, whatever you want to delete, and then get them deleted. That's all. That is the same answer for you, Yasin, as well. Okay, same answer. Is this Azure portal the same as the corporate work environment? Yes, for corporate environment, for individual practice, there is only one Azure portal. There are no different versions of Azure portal. It's all the same thing that you're going to see when you are in the corporate environment. Nothing to worry about.